Hello everybody, Gisele Grenier here. In the video lesson for today, we're going to continue on with the color mixing series. I was starting off to 4-part on mixing basic skin tones. So the first one we did was warm skin tones, which was done in this video lesson. And now we're going to work on basic cool skin tones. So I've got my sketching paper here primed with a good amount of gesso. And the paints I'm going to be using are going to be the Decor Traditions Yellow Oxide, Raw Sienna, Burnt Sienna, Raw Umber, Carbon Black, and Opaque Titanium White. Yes, I've got Carbon Black in here. And I've got them laid out on the palette here. Oopsie, you can't see. There we go. And so I'm using the Traditions because I've got the color index information on the back. And it's important to know what the paint is actually made up of when you're doing portrait colors, especially if you're doing something more realistic, because you need to know where they sit on the color wheel. And I have a whole series of videos explaining all that, so I won't go into that in this lesson. So we're going to be, in this video, you're going to learn how to create 4 mixtures. And although we're using yellows in here, which are typically warm, you'll notice the absence of a particular color, red. Okay, so the absence of red's what makes the skin tones warmer. So with the absence of that, you're going to be cooling it down. So the first mixture we're going to be using is Raw Sienna, Burnt Sienna, and Titanium White. We never start with white because you would end up, we never start with the colors and then add white because you would end up making so much of a mixture. But because this is an actual lesson on color mixing and not the actual portrait colors, I'm going to start with these and then I'm going to add white to it. Typically you would go in reverse, but because we're working with portraits, when you're creating the dark color first and adding white and you create a value string, that gives you a lot of options when painting the layers on portraits. Now in acrylics, it's a bit more challenging because they dry so fast. Typically, I like doing my portraits in oils, but you can use acrylics with an extender to extend the drying time. So we'll start with, Raw Sienna. So I'm going to start off with roughly equal parts and mix those up. And we're just going to put that on raw, the way it is. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that paint, I'm going to kind of wipe out as much as I can and pick up a little bit of white and put that in here. And then I'm going to pick up a bit more white, put that in there. You can see now the jump from here to here is a bit strong, so I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the paint just so the jump isn't that strong. I just want to lighten the value a little bit. What I like to tell people is that you create your values, you try to create maybe 5, and then whatever happens in between is a little bit more natural. Because you only have to add a little bit of color on either side. So that's not too bad. So then I'll just take the mix here. And I'll just put a little bit more. Now you guys shouldn't see any glare on the actual palette. You'll probably see glare here. You shouldn't see glare here. I see a lot of glare. And the vibration that you see here, okay, that's being fixed tomorrow. Guess what? Joe's moving my studio back to the original room. Okay, now we're going to pick up a little bit more white. And a little bit more white. So I'm just picking up dots in the dirty brush. And just picking up, and this creates this value string. That's not quite enough white. And in theory, you can make this value string so where you start off with pure color, you end up just with white. And let me just blot that on a paper towel just to pick up a bit more white. Okay, so you can see that these are a much cooler. This looks a little bit warm, well, because burnt sienna has a bit of red in it, but it's not as red as if you were to use this. So if we take a look at, so we are looking at, there we go. So that's got naphthol red light in here, so you can see the big difference. Okay. Because when you're making the colors, you won't know right up front, oh, I'm only going to use cool colors or I'm only going to use warm colors. You have to look at your subject and whether you're using a live model or working from a photo or working from a digital print. You're going to look and then you're going to go onto your palette, look at the raw colors, and then decide, okay, what's the closest color that I see? Well, I see this. And then, okay, is it lighter, darker, brighter, duller, you know, cooler, warmer? Where's it sit in the color wheel? Ask yourself those questions. Make the mix, compare it, analyze, adjust, and you're going to rinse and repeat that while you're doing your painting. Okay, so that's one mixture. So the next mixture now, which is the mixture that I like using, especially when I want to create a monochrome portrait, okay? Raw umber and titanium white. So if you're serious about creating portraits, whether, I wouldn't say so much mixed media, but maybe not even abstract, but something more impressionistic to the realistic stuff. Creating a portrait in a raw umber titanium white value, just those two, will really teach you about the values, the lightness and darknesses of your subject. Yes, you can do it with carbon black. Yes, you can do it with chromatic black. Chromatic black is transparent though. So with raw umber, if we take a look on the label, we see that it's opaque. And titanium white is opaque. So you're going to get good opacity there. Whereas if you work with transparency, the layers in between will affect what shows through. So we're going to start off now, we're just going to use pure raw umber. And to the naked eye, right here, just looks like a dark brown. Well, if we pick up a little bit of white, and we look here, it looks like that's a bit too much of a jump. Let's pick up a bit more raw umber. Pick up a bit more raw umber. I want to make sure we get a good value scale here. Pick up a bit more umber. And it's a neutral brown. My goodness. It's a neutral brown, and when I look at this, especially when you add a lot more white, to me, under my lighting conditions, it looks like it has a little bit of green in it. But you don't need a lot of, well, for this particular one here, you don't need a lot of white to do your values. So when I think of that, if I just have to add a speck of white, that tells me that the pigment itself is not a strong, intense pigment, which is nice when it comes to doing portraits. Let me just add a bit more white now so we can bump up that value string. So this is a really nice mixture to use when creating your value string for portraits. Now, when I say portraits, you can even use this for pet portraits, animal portraits, wildlife portraits, because you would overlay then, or just leave it the way it is, but you can also overlay transparent paint on top of this. Now, if you want to experiment with oils, you create your acrylic painting with this to completion, and then you can add glazes of oils or glazes of acrylics on top for the color. Now, pop quiz, does anybody know what the actual term is when creating a monochrome painting like this and then glazing with color on top? Comment below, let me know if you know what the actual term is for that. I'm going to take a bit more white and go right here. There we go. My favorite, one of my favorites. Oh, okay. Now I'm going to be using a color that I don't typically use, but because it's great for opacity, is carbon black. So when we think of using carbon black, it's dull. It's very, very dull, dark, but it's opaque. It's a neutral opaque. But when I say neutral, you can get blacks between ivory black, Mars black, carbon black, bone black. They all lean either a little bit more towards the blue or a little bit more towards the red. So what we're going to do is we're going to take carbon black with yellow oxide. Now when I do my portraits, when I'm working with oils, I use yellow ochre, okay, which is the organic version. Yellow oxide is the synthetic version, which is more intense. But in acrylics, Deco uses yellow oxide, and I'm going to use carbon black, and then, of course, lighten the value with titanium white. But I want to show you first just carbon black. I want to do a value scale just with carbon black so you can compare the differences to this. I'm going to pick up some white. Really get that black in there. I'm going to pick up a bit more black. So, how do I explain this? So you kind of see with the way that I've been doing these, I've been kind of heavy on the white. This is why I personally feel, like you may disagree, but why I feel that you need to be okay when you're creating your mixtures that they're never going to be the same. So I can teach this again tomorrow and next week, and the values are going to be different because I'm picking up more or less of one paint. Today, for some reason, I don't know why, but I'm being a little bit more heavy on the white. I'm not sure why. Maybe because it's closer to me. I don't know. There we go. Now I could put even a bit more. I mean, I really went heavy on that. And I'm not cleaning my brush because then it would be really strong. And what I'm doing is I'm squinting my eyes to try to get it to the same value as this. Okay, here's another pop quiz question. What's a really, really, really simple way for you to compare values when you're using paint with color? What's a really simple way to check your values? I think I can go even a little bit darker. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white. A bit more than that. Okay, a bit more white. Now I'm going to jump a little bit heavier on that. This lesson is going to be full of pop quiz questions. Do you see, now again, this now is going to change, and you've heard me preach this to death, how monitors, whatever device you're using, whether it's a computer monitor, laptop, phone, tablet, they're all calibrated differently. What you see may be different than what Mary, Bob, or whoever sees. But with what you're seeing right now, do you see where this color shifts on the color wheel? Mia started to bark. Sorry. So we all grew up thinking that black and white are colors. So if I refer to like titanium white and carbon black as color, it's typically not color. It's used to, it's absent of color. But can you see where this shifts on the color wheel? Do you get an idea? So pop that in the comments below. Alrighty, so now what I'm going to do with this is now we're going to use yellow oxide, carbon black, and titanium white. Now watch what happens. If we take those, now I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I've been using equal mixtures, but with yellow oxide, I'm going to take the yellow oxide, and I'm going to use a little bit of carbon black. And even that was a bit too much. But then again, was it? Depending on what you're looking at. So let me just shift that. There we go. I wonder if I can put the paper towels under here so you can... Oh, see now, see, you don't have glare, but I do. Darn technology. Darn technology. Let's try that. Yellow oxide or yellow ochre, when mixed with carbon black, looks green. So that should give you a hint as to where carbon black leans on the color wheel. Pick up some white. Now you can't see the white on the palette, but you guys know where it is. So with the absence of red, all these mixtures are more on the cool side. You can see the mixture is not going as far. That's because yellow oxide is a little bit more of a weaker pigment. Not weaker meaning cheap, but it's not as intense. So think of phthalo blue or phthalo green. Okay. But now let's do the same thing now. So we see this, and you can tell, you can get an idea of when you're painting, or when you're, whether you're using a model or a reference photo that's printed or a digital print, when you look at your subject matter, you're going to start seeing, as you start doing your, and you have to do these color studies, you have to do them if you want to learn more of portrait painting. But when you look at your model and you're going to look at the skin tone, what I don't like to say, okay, I'm painting, let's say African American, Native American, Indian. I don't look at color that, I don't look at people that way. I look at that skin tone. Okay, so oh, I don't have, oh darn, I don't have anything here. So let's go with this little guy here. So I say, okay, well, Caucasian, but I see a, oh, where am I going to, so you guys don't see glare. Okay, let me try, okay, I'm going to point to it and then I'll turn out so you don't see glare. So if I'm going to look here, I'm going to say, well, I see brown there that looks a little bit red. Okay, so right here. That's how I look at color on people. I think of what's the natural color that I see. I don't think of it as raw umber, burnt sienna, raw sienna. I think of a brown that's on the reddish side, or yellow that's on the orange side, or yellow that's more neutral. I think of actual physical, normal named colors. And then I go from there. Because what that does is that it eliminates any preconceived, what you think you know, when you think, okay, well, and I gotta be politically correct here. When I think of, now, please don't hate me because I'm not sure how to say this, whether it's Black people, African American, skin colors are so different because you have some people that have black skin that's on the blue side, black skin that's on the red side, and even a bit on the orange side, depending on the lighting. And some of those tones are so beautiful, you can't look at it as black skin. You have to look deeper than that, because especially when you're painting people, you need to see the true underlying color. How is the sun hitting their face? Same thing with Indian people. It's Native American or Indian people, however you want to use those words, is you have to look at the actual color of their skin to match and know exactly what color you want to pick. And I know I'm going to get some hate mail on this. And you know what? I'm sorry, but that's the way I see color when I see physical color. And if Joe sees he's going to delete this video, for God's sakes, no, you know what? No. I'm teaching a lesson on how to see color. I see color, paint. Okay, so no hate mail. So now we're going to go back with the yellow, nopes, yellow ochre, yellow oxide. See, now I'm getting all tongue-tied. And I'm going to take a little bit more carbon black. I'm going to make it darker than the mix that we have here. And we're going to go right here. And now we'll go in with the titanium white. And what you'll see now is you're going to see a mixture that's even more on the green side. That's too much. That's too much, too much, too much. Let me just make up a bit more. Oh, I'll be so glad when Joe moves this flippin' table. There we go. So this is another nice mixture to use when you're creating a monochrome study. You guys see glare. There we go. See how it leans a bit more towards the green? So we now know that carbon black leans towards blue because blue and yellow makes green. But the type of yellow and the type of blue determines what type of green you get. Okay. So even if you're not going into formal portrait painting, you can get an idea of what you can use these colors for. So in this, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go put an arrow here and I'm going to go plus CB. That just means I added more carbon black. Okay, so if we assume that these colors, we've got these colors with yellow oxide, well, the next color on the color wheel that is close, but a little bit darker, is raw sienna. Well, what if we took raw sienna, raw sienna, carbon black, and titanium white, then we do the same experiment by adding more carbon black. This is all falling over. You guys should still see that, right? Hopefully you're not seeing any glare. All right, so let's take our raw sienna. And what I should have done, okay, I'll see if I have enough room. Well, you know what? You guys should be able to do this. Just take yellow oxide and titanium white with a color string, then raw sienna and titanium white for another color string to see the differences in the true underlying color. So raw sienna and less carbon black. I just want to darken it just a little bit. I want to get something similar to that value. It's a little bit darker because raw sienna is naturally darker than yellow oxide. And then we're going to take white. Now, the other thing too, so by having the color index information on the back, we know that yellow oxide is opaque. We look at raw sienna. Raw sienna is semi-transparent, which means carbon black, because it's darker and it's more opaque, is going to overpower raw sienna a little bit faster than if we were going to use yellow oxide. Okay, it's a little bit, didn't make enough paint, but you'll get the idea. Go. So that color jump is a little bit strong. And I'm just loading white on my dirty brush. So when you're looking at your subject now, and you're determining, okay, you're looking at the skin tone and you're saying, okay, well, I see that this skin tone is a little bit more, is the first color you see is yellow green. Okay. So you think, okay, well, yellow green, what choices do I have on the palette? Well, yellow green, I know now because I've done my swatches and I've done my practice, my color studies. I know that I can get yellow green with Hansa yellow, Hansa yellow medium, Hansa yellow light, yellow oxide, and raw sienna, plus either a blue or a black. Okay, so I know I can get those colors. And technically, you can make up those colors to then determine, is it lighter or darker, brighter or duller, cooler or warmer, and where does it sit in the color wheel? But we already know that if we were to take Hansa yellow medium, Hansa yellow light with phthalo blue or ultramarine blue, it would be the wrong type of green. It would be so strong. So we go to something that's more neutral, some of the earth colors, and we know that we want to use yellow oxide or raw sienna as our yellow. If we were to take, again, phthalo blue and ultramarine blue, again, it's going to be way too strong. Because we've done our color string, we know that carbon black, although more of a neutral, it leans a bit towards blue, we will get a yellow-green out of this, a more neutral yellow-green. So with experience, you'll be able to answer those questions really easy. Okay, what do I see? I see yellow-green. Is it brighter or duller? It's duller. Is it brighter or duller? It's dull. Is it lighter or darker? Well, depending on the photograph that you're seeing, then that's what you're going to answer. If it's darker, you know you can add a little bit more black. If it's brighter, you can add a little bit more white or a little bit more of the mixture here. Where does it sit on the color wheel? Well, we know that the yellow oxide and carbon black sit more towards the middle of the color wheel, where we're getting absence of color. And then cooler or warmer, well, we know that with carbon black, it's a cooler color. Yellow oxide, although it's a warmer color, again, it's more in the middle of the color wheel where it's not so intense. Again, I have videos covering all this, okay? So there we go. And then when you're painting, when you've got your color strings, and you can do these and have them for reference. And the other thing you can do is take little swatch cards and create little things like this, and then put it towards the actual on the actual subject, whether it's the model or a digital print or a physical print, and see, okay, where do I see that color? Okay, just to do your analysis. So now what I want to do is I want to take the same mixture and I want to add more carbon black, so we can compare these two here, that this here is more neutral. It's less intense. So when you're choosing, you see the skin tone of being yellow-green, then you know, okay, well, I know I can use yellow oxide or raw sienna, but then well, it's more dull. It's not as bright. So then you can choose raw sienna. So now if we want to do the same thing, raw sienna, I'm going to make more, and carbon black. So now what I want is I want to get a mixture that's going to be darker than that. I actually want it to be closer to the value of this here. Oh, that's a little bit too dark, but that's okay. And then a little bit of white. Oh, you can really see how dull it is. That may be a little bit too much, but let's just keep going. Because what you can do then is in between here, just add a bit more raw sienna to get another value scale. I'm going to bring a bit more color in here. Didn't quite make up enough. There we go. I think there's less gesso here because the paint is just sinking into the paper. So I'm going to make my mixtures up here. There we go. This looks like a sand color. But you can see how much more cool it is, how cooler it is versus you using yellow oxide. There you go. So with the raw sienna and burnt sienna, that is really, really red. And I'm thinking I probably made that a little too red. What if I turned around and used this example and come over here and then just added more raw sienna? So we take raw sienna. Oh, will you be able to see? Okay, you already saw me do this exercise, so you should have an idea of what I'm doing. Now raw sienna is semi-transparent. If we look at burnt sienna is opaque. So the burnt sienna is going to overpower, and I have a bit too much water in that mixture here. So I'm just adding a very small amount of burnt sienna. And now just adding more white. And if you want to get some good practice on mixing colors for skin tones, a good site to go to is Pixabay, because the pictures there are free because they're uploaded by a community of people. And what to do is do searches for various skin tones and then try to color match those skin tones. So see the difference? Although this is more on, I would say it's more on the warm side because burnt sienna naturally has a little bit more red-orange in it. It's the absence of naphthol red light or cadmium red light, depending on what paint you're using, which I would put this more towards on the cooler side of the color wheel, but this is the true cool colors here. So can you tell what type of skin tones that you can use to paint this? So you've got, for highlights, you could use this more of a reddish orange, and then you've got your neutrals here. I love this. So you could use these for dark skin, but you can also use these to create a value painting. Doesn't matter what the skin tone is, you can use this to create your value painting, then glaze the color on top of that. And when the glazing, you would not use white. You would not use white or black. You're going to use the actual color. And then we've got the carbon black, which is a black that leans towards blue. You can create your value painting with this as well. But keep in mind that with carbon black, it leans towards blue. So if you were to glaze, let's say a yellow mixture, it's going to turn green. I should probably do a video on that, doing glazing. If you guys want to see videos on glazing over monochrome paintings, let me know in the comments below. Then we've got our yellow oxide and carbon black. Okay, with more carbon black, you see the difference is that this leans more towards green. And although this is quite the jump, you can go in between and create another value scale with a bit more yellow oxide, just so you can get a more gradual shift. And then you've got the raw sienna with carbon black, and this is a really nice mixture here. If I look at this here looks very similar to raw umber, but it's a bit more on the green side. So if you don't have raw umber, you could use raw sienna and carbon black. You could then decide, well, I could use a little bit more of the carbon black just to get something very, very similar to raw umber. I hope that makes sense. But the key is that, you know, with very little colors, you can create all these variations. You have to do the mixtures. Just by watching the videos, you're not going to learn. You got to take it and apply it, because the more times that you apply it, the more you'll retain it in memory. And all these colors here are more economical colors. They're not super high expensive colors. Okay, in general pigments, they're not super expensive. So create your mixtures, and then again, your homework assignment would be go to Pixabay or even Unsplash. You can do that, and do some searches for skin tones or just do a search for portraits. And depending if you want to do a portrait of a man, portrait of a woman, a child. Okay, don't use your own family members, because then you're going to get tempted to be perfect. Always be using strangers as a color study works out best. And then try to match the colors. Pick areas on the face and try to match the colors. Look at the cheekbone for highlights. Okay, what color would you see for highlights? What color would you see for shadows? You know, we covered off warm skin tones and cool skin tones. We still have to cover off mixtures in another video of reddish skin tones and greenish skin tones. So we still have 2 more videos in this series for you to practice with. Alrighty, so whole bunch of pop quiz questions in the video. I'd love to hear from you. So until I see you next time, stay inspired.